Dorothy Ross had been a math teacher for nearly 40 years and had seen a lot in that time. Most students don't like exact sciences, and the elderly woman knew it like no one else. During her time as a teacher, Dorothy acquired several nicknames, the most offensive of which were Mop and Cane. Her students always drew attention to her thinness, and therefore they tried to remind her of it at every opportunity. But Dorothy never really felt offended by their comments and simply treated their attitude as part of her life. She loved her job, and she was willing to put up with some discomfort it entailed. Unfortunately, everything comes to an end eventually. And so there came a point when Dorothy was asked to resign because a young math teacher came to work at her school. Well, I guess that's it. My teaching days are over, Dorothy thought sadly, leaving the teacher's lounge. The elderly woman had no children, and her husband died 5 years ago. As it often happens with lonely people going through a life's hardship, it was her job that helped Dorothy keep going. Deprived of her favorite pastime, Dorothy got depressed. She spent her days looking through the pictures from the times when she was still young and naive and full of optimism. In the 4 years that the woman had her job, she grew so used to getting up at the same time and rushing to school every day that it took her over a month to break this habit. Dorothy's body reacted to the change in her daily routine in a very peculiar way, and just 2 weeks after she quit her job, she started getting stomach aches. I guess I should go see a doctor, get a checkup, although I don't think they'll find anything serious, the woman thought. But as her symptoms kept intensifying, Dorothy decided not to risk it and went to see a doctor. Truth be told, she really didn't like hospitals and did everything she could to avoid them. But a lot of people her age feel that way. Everything was going well until the moment when the doctor saw the first test results. It was then that Dorothy realized that something was definitely wrong. The woman didn't hear anything the doctor said after the word cancer. It seemed that her mind went into a defensive mode. How could this have happened? What did I do to deserve it? Dorothy thought with tears in her eyes. According to her doctor, she had 6 months left to live, at best. Dorothy wasn't ready to hear such a terrifying sentence. For some inexplicable reason, she'd always been sure that she would live a long life, even if not the happiest one. Needless to say, the lonely woman was feeling beyond awful. At that moment, Dorothy couldn't help but feel like the whole world was against her. All the poor woman would concentrate on was her pain and loneliness. Of course, Mrs. Ross wasn't going to give up, but she really didn't have much reason to hope for recovery. The woman understood that given her age, she needed nothing short of a miracle to defeat such an insidious disease. Since the doctors told Dorothy that she didn't have much time left, she decided to throw out her belongings that she didn't have a use for anymore. I'm not going to need any of this anymore, and whoever gets my house after my death definitely won't need any of it either. I'd rather throw it all out myself than have some stranger do it, the woman thought, opening her closet. She took a big bag and started putting all the clothes and shoes into it. Despite the fact that the woman didn't really care about fashion, she had quite a lot of clothes. That was mostly because being a teacher, she needed to make sure that she always looked good. Moreover, she couldn't afford to wear the same clothes all the time, as she was getting ridiculed for it. Having picked up the heavy bag, Dorothy left the house and headed towards the nearest trash cans. As she approached them, the woman stopped for a second to catch her breath, and then gathered her strength and threw the bag into the bin. At the same moment, she heard some strange sounds coming from behind the nearest garbage can. Dorothy listened more closely. She could distinctly hear a dog growling and the muffled sobs of a little child. "What's going on here?" Dorothy whispered, then slowly walked around the trash cans. When the woman completed her maneuver, she saw something very strange. There was a large dog sitting on the ground by the trash cans. It was being patted by a boy of about 6 years. "What are you doing here?" Dorothy asked as softly as possible. The boy shuddered, then turned his gaze to the elderly woman standing in front of him. For a minute or two, he pondered whether he could trust her with his secret or not. Having finally made up his mind, the kiddo answered, "We ran away. My stepfather is mad again. He doesn't want the dog to live in the house. But Buddy is so kind and smart, I can't just kick him out on the street." Dorothy looked into the dog's eyes and realized that the boy was right about Buddy. He really did look smart and very calm. It was obvious that the dog adored his little master, who chose to run away from home instead of kicking the dog out into the street. "Maybe you should go to the police? Is your stepfather mistreating you?" Dorothy asked cautiously. The boy only shook his head in response, letting the woman know that the police wouldn't help him and his dog. "Maybe you could adopt my dog? I can see that you're kind. He's definitely going to like you," the boy asked hopefully. Dorothy's first thought was to refuse. How could I take in a dog if I only have 6 months left to live? Or maybe even less, the woman thought. But looking into the boy's eyes, Dorothy realized that she simply couldn't say no to him. What do I actually have to lose? At least the dog would have a home for 6 months instead of ending up on the street right away, the woman reasoned with herself. "Well, kid, okay, I'll let Buddy stay with me, and you can visit him anytime you want," Mrs. Ross said with a smile. As it turned out later, the boy's name was Ethan, and he lived a couple of blocks away from Dorothy's house. His mother, Olivia Cooper, was basically raising the boy on her own, as her boyfriend spent most of his days at home, sitting in front of the TV with a bottle of whiskey. Upon learning Ethan's touching story, Dorothy immediately felt respect for him. The little boy loved his pet very much, and therefore he wanted to make sure he was safe. As Buddy stepped into his new home, Dorothy said, "Let's make a deal, my friend. You'll behave yourself and won't destroy my furniture, okay? In return, I promise to feed you twice a day and even get you special treats on Sundays." Buddy looked into the woman's eyes as if he wanted to make some amendments to her proposal regarding the frequency of feeding and the number of treats. "Buddy is very happy. See how he's wagging his tail? It means that he sees you as his friend," Ethan explained. Dorothy smiled and went into the kitchen to make dinner. She understood that the boy was probably hungry, and therefore he wouldn't refuse a couple of tuna sandwiches. Buddy also got his share of treats, which consisted of leftover fried chicken that Dorothy had baked for dinner the night before. "Well, that's much better," the woman said with a smile. Dorothy enjoyed watching how the boy and the dog seemed to be competing in who could finish their food faster. Since Dorothy never had children, she finally got to feel like a real grandmother, rejoicing that her grandson came in for a visit and trying to do everything to make him happy. Rushing about the kitchen, making treats for Ethan and Buddy, the woman completely forgot about her pain, which seemed to have disappeared as if by magic. Never before had Dorothy felt such an incredible elation. She treated Ethan like a little prince whom she needed to save from an evil wizard, the boy's stepfather. Having made the decision to let Buddy stay with her, Dorothy never once regretted it. The smart dog never violated the terms of his stay, which the sweet elderly woman voiced when she first brought him home. Buddy didn't mess with the furniture or bark for no reason. Moreover, the dog brought the woman her slippers in the morning, which earned him some special appreciation from Dorothy. The woman spent the next month enjoying her new chores. Even though Ethan lived at home, he came to visit Dorothy and Buddy every day. The boy loved playing with the dog, who was always impatiently waiting for his visits. The most surprising thing was that during this time, Dorothy's health improved a lot. The pain in her lower abdomen gradually subsided and stopped bothering the woman, who kept count of the days remaining until her impending death. "It's all thanks to Buddy. I forget all about my problems with him around," Dorothy said proudly. She also enjoyed spending time with Ethan, who filled his life with the wonderful things that only kids can give. Having met the boy's mother, Dorothy invited her to move in. "Why not? My house is big enough for you and your son. After all, my late husband and I were planning on having children, but it wasn't in the cards." Olivia Cooper looked gratefully at the woman, who solved all of her problems without even realizing it. Thank you so much. I don't even know what to say," the woman exclaimed. Dorothy smiled and caught herself thinking that she greatly enjoyed the company of Ethan and his mother. It just so happened that people united by common problems suddenly felt like one family, in which everyone was surrounded by love and care. But the biggest surprise awaited Dorothy at her doctor's office. Lowering his eyes in embarrassment, the oncologist said something that made the elderly woman's heart almost jump out of her chest. "Mrs. Ross, ma'am, I'm so sorry. I made a terrible mistake. I'll get right to it. You don't have cancer. You're not dying. As for your pain, it was just a minor intestinal colic, which can easily be treated." Dorothy just stood there and couldn't believe what she was hearing. Not a day passed that the woman didn't think about her imminent death, but now it turned out that she wasn't dying and could live for at least a few more years. Dorothy thanked the doctor for his help and slowly walked out of the office. Tears froze in the woman's eyes, but this time she was crying out of happiness, which had never happened to Dorothy before in her life. Having returned home, she kissed Ethan and gave Olivia a hug. "It's all thanks to you and Buddy. If it weren't for you, this miracle would have never happened," the woman whispered. The three of them stood in an embrace in the middle of the kitchen for a long time, while Buddy looked at them in surprise, squealing impatiently, asking the owners for a walk. The dog knew that squirrels were waiting to be chased in the park, as well as the pigeons who always flew over to ask people for some fresh bread.